So, Bob, did you know that on Instagram, you have someone, a fan of yours, who is really jokey, and in a good way, on Instagram? He makes all these half the time I don't even understand the joke, and I'm pretty sure he is doing that on purpose. But one of the jokes that he frequently will say is very Bob-oriented. I think he loves you is the thing.
Okay.
And I posted a video of me and Umberto for, a 15-second little video of us talking about something. And he, of course, commented something to the effect of, I find this video to be offensive because Bob is in it. It was a jokey way of saying that. So did you know that you have a real jokester on Instagram? No. Like, no one else does this. Everyone else on Instagram in the comment section is, just regular kind of comments. But this one person is, I don't know how you call it, like convoluted joke dude or something. And if I post anything without Bob or anything, then he's like, where's Bob?
Damn.
So, convoluted joke man, Bob is right here. So
that's true. So
make your jokes. Let's read some emails. Anonymous annual patron. She says, "Hi, Kirk and Bob. Today I rage canceled my therapy." Have you heard of rage canceling or rage quitting?
No.
It comes from, I believe, from gaming culture, where people will rage quit a game where they're playing a game on their PlayStation and they get real upset and they just throw their controller down, or you're playing a computer game, you stand up, you rage quit. That's what. So I think that's what they're. Today I rage canceled my therapy appointment for this week because I was so mad about a minor oversight by my therapist. She forgot to get back to me about scheduling, and this was the first time ever I'd cancel out of anger in over 2 years of therapy. I knew it was an overreaction, but I was fed up with the cycles of feeling safe and then feeling unsafe. I was even considering if I would just quit therapy completely. Have you ever heard of this kind of dynamic between therapist and client before, or potential rupture?
No, not specifically, but I can imagine it. It's not hard to imagine.
Yeah. Going on. An hour or so later, I got a new episode email from Patreon, one of your episodes. I checked the list of topics and saw the one about whether rupture and repair is rolled in with corrective experiences. I was pretty sure this was an answer to a question I sent you a while ago, and so I listened, and it was a question from me.
Hey!
I remembered how good I had felt about my therapy when I wrote to you, and how at the time I was glad I'd stuck with it through all the difficult times. When my therapist doesn't reject for what I see as crazy behavior, it feels so good and healing. It was also reassuring to hear you say how awful rupture and repair can feel, but how surviving it can help you towards earned security. People often say it can be a very valuable experience, but skip over how painful it is. Any thoughts on that, Bob?
I agree. Rupture and repair is painful.
What do you think she's talking about?
I'll be honest with you. I sort of daydreamed for a sec.
Oh, okay.
Golly.
Going on.
I'm not doing my job.
That's fine. So after being reminded of all this, I uncanceled the appointment. So I think to bring you up to speed, Bob. You have very deceptive eye contact, by the way, because you're looking right at me the whole time. To bring you up to speed, she had a scheduling conflict with her therapist, and the therapist forgot to get back to her about it. And then she according to her words, overreacted and quit the appointment and said, I canceled the appointment. And then this episode came up, and then she was reminded to listen to this older question that she had submitted that exemplified how much she liked her therapist. And so she was reminded of, that's the baseline, is I like this therapist. Right now, I don't, but I'm reminded of the overall thing. And I think that this applies in this is differentiation, essentially. It's the ability to take a step back from our feelings and look at them and evaluate them.
Yeah.
And this is much more commonly felt while in conflict with your partner, for example, that in the moment when you're hurt and you're in conflict, I will have a very distorted point of view, and feel like very pessimistic and very negative about the person and the relationship, to the point where for many people, they might start thinking about divorce or breaking up.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but then they recover, maybe even without even having any kind of conversation with your partner. Like the triggering diminishes over a few days. And then you look back, if you care to, on the state of mind that you were in a few days ago when you were triggered. And you wonder, like, wow, I was in a really negative place. But baseline, even acknowledging the problems with my relationship and my partner, this is a good relationship. Yeah, there's some problems, but I don't think it's break upable in terms of how bad it is. That was weird that I was in that. So the wisdom, or the differentiated person, will, in the moment with a therapist or with their partner, will ask the question. That's always the thing with differentiation, is just knowing to ask the question, knowing that there is a question. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily answer it, but you at least take the time to wonder, are my feelings exaggerated in this moment? Will I always feel this way? Are the thoughts I'm having, the motivations of breaking up, are they based on an ongoing issue that might be illuminated right now? Or is it just that I'm really hurt and I'm looking for a way out of that?
Yeah.
That ultimately is not what I want. That's the definition of differentiation, which is what this patron did in this moment, was ultimately my goal in life is to have earn security and to heal. And if I act on this impulse that feels very, wise in this moment, feels very justified in this moment of quitting therapy altogether, if I act on that impulse and hand myself over completely to my feelings right now, then overall, my goal of having a good therapist and healing will not be met.
No.
So I have to consider that and look at it and make different choices so that I don't ruin my life in the process. That's what differentiation is.
Right on.
So that's what she did. And the other thing I'll say is that differentiation can involve a system. So meaning that you have a method. It's not just something you will into existence. And an element here, patron, that you utilized was that you listened to an episode of the podcast. Like in the future, patron, you might want to remember to do this again. If you have another rupture and you are having that same feeling of wanting to run away from your therapist, and you have this knowledge to, as a part of your efforts of differentiation, you actually listened to that older episode, which reminds you of really the baseline and the norm of your relationship with this therapist, which is positive, Other people listening might not have that ability, but I do know some listeners will tell me that if a particular episode or segment, or even an episode where we answered their question in particular, they will save and just periodically listen to that or something.
Cool.
They might particularly do that with you, Bob, because there are people that really love your voice and your demeanor and the things that you say. That's so nice. Just as even if you're not directly talking to them or even an issue that they're dealing with, it just is a corrective experience to be next to you in terms of your vibe.
That's nice.
Is what people will say. So people out there, think about developing a system, not just trying to exert willpower in the moment to have the triggers for differentiation processes. Do you have anything like this that you use in the moment? Like you get into a fight with Colleen and that you have a system in place to attempt to have those question marks?
Colleen and I never fight. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, but it's nothing so specific as what you're describing. It's more like grumbly and righteous, and she probably has her own version of that as well. And then I see her. Back before COVID, I'd go to the office. Sometimes
so your method is to physically go to her.
To actually get in a room with her.
But I'm guessing you have to do something before that because there's a part of you that would be like, fuck this shit. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So what do you do? What's the routine?
There's a couple things. One is I let time pass.
Do you know that you're doing that? You're like, okay, wait,
nope.
let time pass.
I'm more like, fuck this shit, I'm out of here.
Okay, it just happens.
Or I have to go to work. And actually, that's one of the nice benefits of my job is it provides that shift all the time because I'm working with couples who oftentimes have a similar dynamic. And I'm seeing things from a more centered or more differentiated point of view and can be reminded that Colleen's not the enemy. It's not this thing that I tell myself, and I can start recognizing that my righteous indignation is so yummy. Oh, it's so juicy. Is a cover mostly for shame.
Your own shame?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you have that awareness in the moment.
I'll have that awareness when I see it in a client, and I get to see that in a lot of clients.
Oh, and that'll remind you of you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, all the time.
It'll pull you out of your righteous indignation.
And
you'll
I'll
see
find
it in clients. And,
yeah. And I'll find my soft place for my client, and that helps me find my soft place for Colleen.
So if you're retired, would the conflict issues get worse with Colleen? Because you wouldn't have that innate break and that sitting outside of yourself while you're looking at your clients kind of a thing? That's
an amazing question. I never thought about it. I'm never retiring, for one. No, I don't know if that's true.
Well, I mean, you might.
It might. One of the benefits of my job is that's one of the things that...
Because so many of your clients are couples, and I'm guessing majority, if not all of your clients, every session are akin to the kinds of pitfalls that you would fall into with Colleen.
Yep. Yeah. And then, personal counseling is often providing that same thing. He won't let me get on a righteous soapbox. He'll never be a dick about it, but he won't let me do that. What he'll do is he'll just constantly refocus our attention on what's happening between us right now.
Yeah.
And most of the time I'll come out of a session with a softened attitude. So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, for me, I have these, I don't know what you call it, but alerts that I've learned over the years that I pay attention to. They're all in my mind.
Yeah.
There'll be certain phrases or impulses that I'll have that are, I think, real common for people. Like, I don't know if it's this severe, but it's something like, what am I doing in this relationship? Or this will never change. Like, you need to get out of this thing, or something like that.
Something like that.
There'll be some, that's more extreme, but maybe another one is, I have these sentences that go through my mind where I'm just really angry.
Yeah.
I'm really just like, that's fucking bullshit. I'll be thinking it in my head, sort of a thing.
Right.
And when I notice that, which I would say is most of the time by the age I'm now, most of the time I would say, it'll prompt me to remind myself that I'm in a state and that I won't feel this feeling for long.
Yeah.
And it'll completely go away. And it's weird though, because in the moment, it's sort of like right now we're at the end of summer. It's hard to imagine that it would get cold and rainy and snowy. Right. We're in shorts right now. The windows are open. The AC is on, actually. Yeah. The sun is out. And it's, even though it happens every year and the years get shorter and shorter for us, it's always hard to remind myself what it feels like to be in winter.
Yeah.
And when you're in winter, it's hard to identify with like summertime and opening the windows and that kind of. So in that way, when I'm in that moment, it's like impossible for me to really fully accept and relate to not having this kind of pain and anger. But I've been through it so many times that I have to tell myself, but it will happen. You know, every year winter comes and then summer comes after that. And when I'm in the middle of this feeling, every single time, without even doing anything, you know, she doesn't have to apologize. I don't have to work this out. In a few days, I'll just feel something shift in my mood and my demeanor and my thoughts and my feelings. It'll just happen because I'll just be less triggered. You know, the neurons just kind of return to homeostasis or something. You know?
Right.
And I just have to beat that into my head to remind myself, don't take action, and also don't draw really any conclusions. Like, one of the best things that I can do for myself in that my system is I tell myself, just stop thinking. Because if you think, it'll only be in this negative place.
Feed it, yeah.
And it just builds.
Yeah.
If you can always think about it tomorrow. You don't need to think about it right now. Just do something else. Just watch Netflix or
lunar lander. Just get it out.
Just do some Legos. And you know, worst case scenario, you give yourself another day to think about it later. But, you know, best case scenario, you won't even have these feelings anymore. You won't need to deal with them. It'll just go away. It's just like a storm that's passing overhead.
I've heard you talk about this many times.
Oh, you have?
Oh, yeah.
In what context?
Just like this.
With my wife?
Oh, sometimes, but mostly just this kind of perspective and attitude.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the more I drill it into my head when I am not triggered, the more likely it happens when I am.
Yeah.
And it's really helpful. Like, it's a lifesaver. It doesn't always work, and I could get better at it, because the problem I think maybe that I'm facing now when I think about it is that when it is necessary for us to work it out and talk about it, because it's not always necessary, but when it is necessary, when I feel it's necessary, and I think it is often necessary to, look, we have to talk about what happened, sort of a thing.
Right.
In those moments, it's still really hard for me to remain differentiated the whole time.
Yeah.
Because of re-triggering and just the way that we communicate about these kinds of things.
Right.
And I will lose my shit in those scenarios, which isn't great.
No, it's not.
So maybe I need to drill it into my head. The next task is I need to really drill it into my head. Like, okay, when you're working it out, just take a relaxation pill, a chill pill, and just have some patience. You know, I can be pretty impatient. And
you're not talking about actually taking a pill. That's a metaphor.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if we had a chill pill?
We do.
Yeah. Well, they're benzos.
Yeah.
But would that work? It probably would.
Yeah, probably.
Make you sleepy after a while.
Sure.
But,
I mean, so would a martini. A martini would probably work too.
Well, but that's dangerous, because that can compromise your prefrontal cortex, which can make feelings uneditable and uncontrolled. You know, I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but alcohol and conflict don't always go well together.
Oh, no, I'm not saying go drinking.
Oh.
A martini, one drink.
Yeah.
Probably not going to make you lose,
Martinis are funny, because I didn't know this until I was older, that, because James Bond.
Yeah.
That's how since I was 7 years old, it's like shaken not stirred. Vodka martini, shaken not stirred.
Yeah.
And another thing that I learned, just another side note.
Whoa.
Did you know that, you probably know this because you know all these things, gin is just vodka with stuff in it.
Yes.
I always thought gin was literally made out of pine trees or something. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. They'll flavor it with juniper berries.
But they flavor it.
Yeah.
They just take vodka.
Yeah.
So you know all this stuff. Yeah. I watched this YouTube video about how to make gin.
Yeah.
And they just take vodka and they refine it to make it real clean. Mm-hmm. And then they put it in this giant vat with a bunch of herbs.
Yeah.
Like juniper berries and all these other kinds of dried herbs and stuff.
Right.
And it just makes the vodka into, pine tasting vodka.
Right.
It's just flavored vodka. It's like that vodka that you would see, Patron orange.
Right. No, Patron. That's
absolutely.
Absolute
Right.
orange citron, right?
Yeah. Absolute orange citron or absolute and
Vanilla.
jalapeno or something,
God.
And good God, I mean,
I just have a headache thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I always think, fine, but just take regular vodka and put some jalapeno in it, or put some orange essence,
and you've just made gin.
Right. Anyway, so the other thing that it took me a long time to learn was a martini is basically just straight booze.
It's a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You take in a vodka martini, you take vodka and a tiny bit of vermouth, depending on the mix, and you put it in ice, and then you just pour it into a glass.
That's right. Maybe you have maybe you use olive juice.
And the ice is just to chill it, and maybe add a little bit of water, right? Because you're probably melting some of the ice, but
that's true.
It's just slightly watered down straight booze, and you put it in this martini glass. I knew this years and years ago, but I was reminded of it because someone got a martini recently, and I had a sip of it, and I was just like, good God, that's just straight booze. That's right. Like Jiminy Crickets, and it's not good. It's not a good, like, vermouth is disgusting as well. Like, no one drinks vermouth straight.
Very few people. Yeah.
I think it's really, I had it in college, and I remember thinking it was just utterly.
Now there's sweet vermouth that you put in a Manhattan, and then there's dry vermouth that you put in a martini. So there's two kinds.
Oh. Well, anyway, I don't understand. So
right.
When I think the other thing is, like, martinis can be of varying size, right?
Yeah.
You can get a martini that would be maybe one shot, and you can get martinis that are like 5 shots,
right?
Depending on what the bartender decides.
Yeah.
So when you say martini, that could mean a lot of things.
It could.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but a small amount of alcohol will probably do the same thing as a Valium or a Xanax.
I wonder, though. I mean, they're very similar GABA action, but I wonder if, at least anecdotally, with alcohol,
we're talking about chill pills.
Well, I think it's worth talking about, not as a recommendation for this, but as a caution for people.
Oh,
because people will drink and get into it with their partners.
Oh, yeah, no, big mistake.
And really bad things can happen there because your brain is malfunctioning,
right? And
you're not feeling or thinking straight.
No.
And things can escalate real fast.
Yeah.
So, so there's that. But with benzos, have you heard of that happening?
Benzo escalation?
Yeah. Where people...
I've never heard of that.
Take, Xanax and start flying off the handle.
I have never heard of that.
Yeah,
no.
see, I wonder if it's a different...
Maybe it just hits the brain different.
Kind of a thing, yeah. Well, it seems like it does. Because, like, I can only think of... There was one time where I was prescribed a pretty significant dose of Valium, another benzo.
Really?
For my tooth when I had an implant put in. And back then, I had a lot more anxiety about these kinds of things.
Right.
I don't so much anymore because I've done a lot of exposure therapy on myself.
Right.
But just to tell you the procedure, it's a long procedure, and they cut open because it was on a baby tooth. So
you still had a baby tooth 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think my sister still has one of her baby teeth.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was being held in place by the teeth next to it.
Yeah, right.
Every once in a while, dentists would say, like, you should probably have this removed.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, well, do I have to?
Yeah.
And it was a lot shorter than my other molars.
Right.
I was like, do I have to? And they're like, well, not really. And I'm like, well, then I don't want to.
Yeah.
And then eventually, though, it started to get infected underneath because it didn't have a root. And so it was just levitating above a layer of gum.
Yeah.
Gums.
Gums.
You don't have a single gum.
But a layer of gum. Gum tissue, gums.
Gum tissue. Okay. A layer of gum tissue. And then it got stuff in underneath it, and anyway, so they got to take it. So they took it out, and then to put in the implant, they have to cut open the gum tissue.
They do,
and flap it back.
Yes,
to expose the jawbone.
Right,
and then they drill with successive larger drills because they don't want to crack. If you work with drills and wood, you know that if you use too big of a drill bit, you can actually cause cracking, right? So you start with a little drill bit and then a bigger drill bit, and they have to do this over and over again into the jawbone, and then they put a metal female receptor or a post or something.
It's a post, yeah.
Okay. I think they put they put some sort of metal in the jawbone, and then over time they wait for a while while the bone infuses with the grabber onto things on the metal thing to keep it secure.
Right.
And then they flap the gums back. Anyway,
and then they put a crown on top of that eventually.
Yeah. And it's graphic as I just described it, and it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And while you're laying there, you can smell and hear and see, your jawbone getting drilled into, and there's debris coming out of your mouth, and it's pretty elaborate. So I was utterly terrified of this, and my dentist, Asian guy, because is this true in other cities? Almost so many dentists are Asian Americans. Back in the day it was a lot of Japanese guys, but now it's a lot of Chinese and Korean. It's just like one of those things that you follow in your uncle's footsteps, sort of a thing. But anyway, so Chinese American guy, and I told him that I was terrified, and he's like, "Oh yeah, me too." He told me that he has tremendous anxiety about dental procedures, even though he's the dentist.
Yeah.
And he says that he goes, "I'll give you the dose that I give myself." And so it was a fair amount of Valium. Anyway, so I took a lot of Valium that morning, and I remember noting, because it was the first time I'd ever taken benzos, and I was with Stacy. She was with me because you can't. Well, she was just with me, I think, for moral support, because the dentist was literally a block away from my house downtown. So I think she was just there. But
you could have walked home,
right? Yeah. But she, I thought, so have the procedure, and then I go home and instantly I take a nap because Valium will do that.
Yeah.
And I woke up, and later in the day, I'm, recalling the intoxication period, and I said, because what I was marveling at is I had zero anxiety, like none.
Wow.
I was chilling in that chair while all this was happening, and I was just like, whatever.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and I just was like, my God, benzos work, because
they do.
Because even when they took the tooth out, like a week earlier, he just took pliers and just pulled it out of my because it was just wedged between two teeth.
Nothing holding it.
The amount of I almost fainted just from that.
Yeah.
And that they didn't have to break the skin for that.
Yeah, no, they just had to.
They're just pulling something. It's just like I was flossing something out of my. They're taking a foreign object that's no longer attached to my body, just out of my mouth.
Right.
And I almost fainted. And he, because he knew I was anxious, he said, "Okay, I'm going to do it real fast, so it's going to be kind of firm." And he did it in literally like a second and a half.
Wow.
He went in and just pulled it out. I almost passed out from that.
Yeah.
So
your heart rate was way elevated, and you were really
sweat, tunnel vision.
Yeah,
pretty bad. So you can imagine that I'm like, the procedure, my head's going to explode. So to go from that to zero anxiety, I was like, my goodness, the miracle of modern science.
Yeah, right.
Even though benzos have been around for 50 years or something. Anyway, so I'm telling Stacy that I was like, wow, it really took away my anxiety. And the other thing is I wasn't drunk at all. I thought I would be hammered.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, you were acting kind of funny. you were real social with like the receptionist and stuff. And and I did remember that, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess I was. But it's a different kind of intoxication. When you're drunk, you know it, right? You know that you're different, and you feel different. At least I do. If I'm buzzed, I feel it. I'm like, okay, it's very noticeable. But with benzos, I think I was flying high, but in terms of the prefrontal cortex issue, the inhibition, I think it's not as severe. That's anecdotal. I don't know if that's the official line with these kinds of things.
I don't either.
But or maybe I just didn't have that much Valium or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, let's take a break. What do you say?
Yeah.
All right, we're back from the break. Let's do an OPP. What do you say?
Sure.
So these people became patrons in the beginning of 2021.
Wow.
And have stayed patrons through thick and thin. We have Cat Pole from Calgary, Alberta. We have Kara from Coatesville, Pennsylvania. Do you know Coatesville?
I do.
These are all annual patrons, by the way.
Wow.
We have Gundula from Germany, I believe, from Hamburg. We got Mia from Michigan. We have Julie from Lexington, Virginia. We got Jasmine from Australia. Lisa from Ontario. Elisa from Oklahoma. Elisa.
Elisa, I think.
Yeah. Lorianne from Quebec. We got Cedar from Wisconsin. Muzi, Sacramento. Zia from Seattle.
Hey.
Rosina from God knows where. Sarav, Kelly, and Chloe from God knows where. Thank you so much for becoming a patron and staying a patron through thick and thin. Seriously. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the patrons. Let's read an email here.
Do we finish the other one?
Oh, no. I will finish. It's just kind of a conclusion. So after being reminded of all this, the patron heard the previous episode where we were talking with.
Oh, right.
I uncanceled the appointment. Hopefully I was quick enough, and hopefully I can work through this and move another step closer to earned secure attachment. Thank you for the answer and the lucky timing. It had a big impact. And yeah, to conclude, what I'll say is that earned security, as I think the patron is pointing out, is not without its pain and anxiety and triggering. The closer you get to the object of earned security, the more vulnerable and the more scared and the more triggered that you're going to get, the more ruptures that are going to happen. It's not all fun and games, correcting for abandonment and neglect and abuse. It's fraught. There's reasons why people avoid it. So expect that is the point.
Yeah.
And have measures in place to be able to evaluate, because it's a tough thing, because what if you're a client and you actually have a bad therapist, and you probably should terminate and look for another therapist?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
How can you tell the difference between that and just the regular sorts of ruptures that are worthy of repairing? It's hard to determine that. So you need kind of a system. Sometimes I think, and I feel like we are kind of this role for people that, particularly people with these kinds of schemas and these kinds of susceptibility to rupture and the need for repair, that not only do you need a therapist, but you need like a coach that will help you occasionally with the therapy.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we are that for some people.
Hey, that's cool.
That we are this auxiliary helping presence that can help people get back on track, or can maybe even help people, guide them to see what sort of therapist they need. A lot of people will say that.
Right.
I feel like it should be an official role sometimes, like it could be facilitated. Like, say you and I had this agreement where for certain clients, you, like, say for me, I have a borderline client, and just as a matter of course, I say, well, my treatment model is to have an ancillary coach.
Yeah.
They're also a clinician,
right? And
officially, according to legal and ethics, this other person is also your therapist. It's like we're doing co-therapy, but But the way to think about Bob, and you'll have a short appointment with him next week. The way to think about him is that he's there in case you need to talk to someone about our relationship.
Yeah.
If there's a rupture, or if you want an advocate for against me or something, or to speak up for you. And I want you to check in with Bob at least once a month for 15 minutes. Because you can imagine that being really useful, not only in situations like this with ruptures, but maybe even like just with any client where, say in that meeting, it's just a matter of course that you would ask my client, so if there was one complaint that you would have about Kirk and about the therapy, what would it be? Because, there's got to be something. And the fact that you would know me and my foibles would help, and you might even say like, well, because say the client says, well, I don't know, I feel like things are going fine. And you detect, and maybe I even tell you, look, you really got to drill down with this client because she's not very forthcoming and will be overly nice. She's a people pleaser. So, really kind of drill down on any complaint, because that'll be very therapeutic, and also it'll help me to know how to be the best therapist for her. And then you might even say, well, I'm just trying to think what kind of common issues.
Oh, come on. You don't have any foibles.
You might say, I might tell you to say, well, Kirk sometimes doesn't really understand what people are saying, and he assumes that he does understand or something. And so has that ever happened to you?
Right.
Or you could even just say, every client has the following experience where they feel misunderstood. When was the last time you felt misunderstood?
Oh, I like that. That's good.
Yeah. And then the client says, oh, well, there was this one moment where blah, blah, blah. And then, you say, well, so do you want to tell him, or do you want me to tell him, or do you think it's worth it? What, and then and then she could say, yeah, could you tell him?
Yeah.
And then you're like, yep, I'll tell him. I'll tell him right away.
Right.
And then you tell me, and then I tell the client that Bob told me that you had said this, and you're in big trouble, and I'm terminating with you, just joking. And thank you so much. It's triangulation, but it's potentially useful, and it's an interim step maybe between giving the client safety and trust so that they could tell me directly in the future. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you know what I mean? Like you just imagine this model working really well.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah. And I wonder if people are doing this sort of thing.
DBT has an element of that, in that when you have trouble with your primary therapist, you can rely on the person who's your skills trainer. You take that skills class, and they will help you with your skills to get, they'll say it like this. They'll say, well, you got to get your therapist shaped up. So they'll help you figure out how you want to approach that. And, you'll just apply skills to that relationship. It doesn't happen often, but it happens sometimes, and can be really useful for exactly this thing.
Right.
Yeah. But I've never heard of it outside of that.
Right. I mean, I'm guessing informally it'll happen when you have a treatment team.
Yeah.
Like for a time I worked at a chemical dependency center, and I was in charge of the therapy and the psychology and the assessments.
Right.
And the chemical dependency folks were in charge of not only individual, but also group chemical dependency treatment.
Right.
And so we could have that utilized in that way where, say, a client might tell me that she feels dismissed by the chemical dependency counselor or vice versa.
Right.
And we could coordinate in that way.
Yeah. Could be.
But
good.
so many of us are in private practice and don't really have
and
that.
We don't really do that. Yeah. One of the things that, if you're lucky enough to grow up in a supportive two-parent family, that can happen where you get to talk to dad about something that happened with mom.
Right.
Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah. And people will call it triangulation as if it's a bad thing all the time.
No.
And in my opinion, there's functional and dysfunctional triangles.
Yeah.
And the functional ones are there to help the system and the individuals to grow and to function better and to have their needs met.
Yeah.
So if it's dysfunctional, then it keeps the problem in place,
Right.
And, the way I was wording it earlier of if it's all understood that this is an interim step where the client can gain trust and safety so that eventually she can tell me directly.
Yeah.
And then that can be translated and generalized to the outside world where she can tell other people directly, then it's in the service of that function, and it's not avoiding it or keeping the problem in place,
Right.
Like, I guess as an example of this, just to be specific, maybe eventually you and I determine that this client is telling you all complaints about me and not giving herself the opportunity to tell me directly.
Yeah.
She's avoiding. And then you say, well, okay, I'm glad you're telling me. And we've both decided that I think you're ready to tell him directly. You know what I mean? How do you feel about that?
Support and push.
Yeah.
Support and push.
Yeah.
Not just push, not just support. Support and push.
And if she pushes back, okay, well,
Okay,
you're not
well,
ready.
not ready.
But let's work our way to that, because you deserve to be able to be heard directly.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You never stop mattering.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, the reason I daydreamed is because I was thinking about a rupture with my therapist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What happened? Do you want to talk about it?
Okay. He was inordinately late to a session. He's always late.
Right.
I know you have a peeve about that. He was like
How late?
8 or 9 minutes.
Okay. Usually he's how long?
2, 3. Yeah.
I mean, why? Do you know what I mean? Like, just adjust everything back 3 minutes. Do you know what I mean? It's like people that it's people that have like their alarm clock that's like perpetually 15 minutes in the future. It's like, just adjust your life backwards.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So he shows up, and I noticed what happened was I felt ashamed. He shows up late, and I feel ashamed.
Of what?
It turns out ashamed of being frustrated about that. And like, I can't say, because if you say, then you'll lose. If I say, then I'll lose, he won't want to, he'll fire me or something. He'll fire me. Or he won't fire me, but he'll have like secret resentment that he won't talk about. And, it's just as good as getting fired because the connection's broken, right? So we spent the entire hour on me feeling ashamed and him just tracking it. He didn't try to do anything with it. He didn't try to take it away, which I appreciate. And he also highlighted that it made sense to be frustrated, and he's a good guy. He's good about it.
What sort of questions or statements does he say to stay in that place? Because it's a real odd type of meta conversation that even in therapy, I think, doesn't happen often and doesn't happen enough. It's a real scary place, because I, as a therapist, have done that kind of work with clients, and I find that it stretches me a bit to, it sounds like this is what this guy does maybe with a lot of his clients.
Yeah, I think so.
And I don't do it all the time. And when I do it, I find that I have to really resist the urge to go in other directions, to intellectualize or other kinds of therapeutic things, like talking about internalized voices, or where does this come from? Did your mom abandon you? Because he doesn't even want to do that, right?
No.
It's all just right between.
Right,
So what kinds of things does he say to stay in that place?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know I'm not answering your question directly. I asked him if he felt embarrassed. And he said, yeah. Also, he knows this thing about himself, and he really accepts that one of the consequences is it has this impact, and he actually has lost clients because of it. He doesn't grudge it at all. He's just like, yeah, it makes sense. That's outside someone's limits. And, we did make a deal that I would be here at 9:00 and you would be here at 9:00, and we would see each other for this hour. And I'm not holding up my end. And particularly this day, he doesn't tell I don't recall him telling me what he was doing. I think it doesn't really matter. He didn't try to defend it. It is, as you say, he won't let it get intellectual, and he won't explain it away as if that's supposed to do something.
Does he ask you a question at some point about, tell me how you feel, or?
He'll several times he's like, it looks like, you're ashamed. Like, I'm the one that messed up and you're ashamed. He said that a couple, 3 times, but it's a few weeks ago, so I can't really remember.
And then you would talk about that for
I'd
a
talk
while?
about the fact that I couldn't lift my eyes to see his face.
Uh-huh.
And he would say things like, it looks like you're having sadness. It looks like there's tears. I feel tears too.
Uh-huh. And then what if you were to say something like, I just don't understand why you can't be on time? What would he say?
He'd say, it's okay to be pissed off at me.
So that focusing on your relationship and your feelings towards him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because there's so many responses to that.
Yeah. There's lots of,
I understand why you can't be on time. And then you, as a therapist, there's thousands of things you could say.
You could say, here's why. That's a total waste of time.
And I'm sorry that,
you could say you're
late.
sorry. Yep.
I'll try to do better next time.
He doesn't say that.
Yeah. How was your week? That kind of thing. Yeah. Interesting.
He'll say, this time is particular. Like, I was really late.
Yeah. And it's okay to be angry at me.
Yeah.
And what if it's another kind of session where, you sit down? How does he open the session?
I don't remember. I think it was really late.
No, a different session where he's only 3 minutes late. How does he start the session?
Oh, well, it's some version of, we're here. We get a chance to pay attention to your experience of our connection.
That's what he says.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what I say is, how are things going?
Right.
Or what do you want to talk about? Which is so much more general.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he literally just starts off with like, okay, here we are. Let's talk about our relationship.
Yep.
And then say you were to start, which would be normal, complaining about your marriage or talking about something that pissed you off at work or something. And would he just interrupt you, or would he just let you talk? What would you do? At some point he'll interrupt, and he'll do one of 2 things. He'll ask me if this is what I want to talk about. Because if it is, he'll listen. So he'll say, so is this what you want to be talking about with me right now? Implying, are you avoiding something, or would you rather be talking about something about us, or? More like a question about, is this truly your autonomy and agency? Because if it is, good. That's part of what we're here for, is to have you acting from your authority. So might you at times say, yes, this is what I want to talk about right now? Occasionally, yeah. Most of the time that's not true. Okay. And most of the time, so he might say that, or he might say, what's happening here? What's it like to be talking to me? Like, what does this feel like right now? Here. When so in the middle, as you're talking about something in your life outside of therapy, right? He'll direct you to the relationship. And this is more common for me to say something like this, of like, what's it like to be talking with me about this, Yeah. And given your routine, that that's a prompt to, because if you just ask that once every few months, it's a different thing than literally every session, every session, he's emphasizing your relationship and your feelings towards him. And, and then it can help you to, and there's also kind of a demand in there of, the message from the therapist is, I believe that you should be, or what would be helpful for you is to focus on your feelings towards me. Yeah, actually, that's one of the things that he said in that session. He said, like, I can't tell you why I think this is really important right now, but I'm convinced that it is, that we keep paying attention to what are your feelings toward me here and now. Yeah. And he says he doesn't know why. He said that in that particular moment. Has he ever said that he knows an answer to that? I think if I asked him, he would have an answer. That would probably be variable, because
But I think what happened in that moment is things between us were so intense that, you don't have access to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because on one hand, I could see that being helpful to really be in the moment as a therapist.
Yeah.
And to just not concern yourself with those kinds of intellectual questions.
Exactly.
But another thing is I could see it being useful to explain it, at least occasionally, to a client, that, look, here's what's I believe is happening,
right.
is that as you are given a space to really talk openly about your feelings towards me, and for me to be, at the very least, non-abusive, but also very caring and open and compassionate towards even feelings that you have that are real, the sorts of feelings that people are typically ashamed of, like anger towards me or judgment towards me or rejection of me or shame or something. But really all feelings, even if you're just feeling joyful about me, creating a space where not only are you allowed to do that, but I actually actively am constantly encouraging you to do that, because there's a lot of opportunities for both of us to avoid that and stick to easier topics.
Right.
Then through that action, you're made to feel like you matter, and that and the neurons that develop over time. We can talk about that you matter, or we can just actually make you matter.
Yeah, that's right. That second one.
And if we repeat that over and over again, then you'll actually not just intellectually think you matter, but you'll actually feel like you matter because you've gone through that.
Right.
So that's why I'm doing that. You know, you can imagine, has he ever said anything along those lines?
Yeah, those are exactly, I mean, he won't use those words, but yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That is the point.
Okay.
It's, it's all corrective experience. It's really all it is. And so I'm like, are you going to get tired of me being frustrated? Are you going to get tired of me feeling ashamed? Are you going to get tired of me not making a change? And he gets to survive that. Sounds so dismal. Walk me through it.
You don't have a lot of individual clients, but do you do this kind of work with your clients?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want them to, they did this thing on 60 Minutes when I was a kid, a long time ago. And I don't know why, but they were in China, and they were walking around this village, rural China. And there was one of the segments in the story was about when two people want to make a barter. They sit down next to each other and they put a blanket over their lap and they talk about the weather and they shoot the shit, latest gossip, blah, blah, blah. And underneath the blanket, their hands have a language and they're striking the deal. How many goats for how many, I don't know what people trade, whatever people trade, right? And so, and it's happening under the blanket. And then when they conclude the deal, they fold the blanket back up and they go about their business. And the thing is that most of the time that's happening, like even now between us. I mean, I can't say what it is, but there are two conversations. There's what we're talking about ostensibly, which, whatever. And then there's what's happening between us underneath the quote blanket.
The real conversation.
Yeah. And it's always happening between people, especially close people. No, I take that back. It's always happening.
Yeah.
My therapist, I think, is interested in what's under the blanket most of the time. Though if I say I really want to talk about, that's your agency, that's your authority, that's your autonomy. Yep, great. Then that's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But most of the time that's not the case. Most of the time it's not my agency. It's avoidant or something that's not what it is.
And by agency, I think you mean another phrase for it would be getting your needs met.
Yeah.
Meaning that to talk about a complaint you have in your personal life outside of therapy is ultimately not coming from a place of your needs.
No.
You might feel like you have to say those things because you don't want to bother your therapist with the more important things and yourself. You know, it's easier to talk about other people than to talk about what you need.
Right.
And I'll also say that the conversation under the blankets can occur even while you're talking about the weather.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be very concentrated if you pull the blanket off and you don't talk about the weather. You just have the real conversation and that's it. And I this is how I'm oriented is a client will be, say, complaining about their spouse. And I have determined that the corrective experience that they need is, say, acceptance and a safe place to be themselves. And so I will listen to them, and in my head, given that this is a trauma for them being rejected, that I might be provoked through transference and countertransference to actually reject or to criticize subtly, to be like, kind of feels like you're being a little unfair to your partner or something like that.
Yeah.
Or to just have a vibe of like,
Yep.
well, what else do you want to talk about or whatever?
Yeah.
And I will notice that and say, oh, okay, he's actually socializing me to agree with his interject, which is to reject. And I have to work against that and provide a corrective experience by accepting, even though it's kind of hard in this moment, but I have to find the compassion so I can be genuine and authentic and then say and listen from that place. Even though we're still talking about his spouse, I'm focusing on that under conversation and do believe that absolutely is corrective for people.
There may be utility in making it explicit.
Huh?
There may be utility in making it explicit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if I've ever thought about this before, and I'm just thinking about it now, so I don't know how refined this is. I mean, my temptation is to say that your therapist model is better and more expedient and concentrated because you're assured that you are focusing on what really matters, right?
I think so.
But on the other
I don't know
hand,
about better, but yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, I could see his style of therapy, unless he's really good at it, which it sounds like he is. I could see his style of therapy rubbing a lot of people wrong because they're like, it kind of feels like you don't want me to talk about my life. Like you don't care about what's happening. I'm telling you, I'm, at work, this shit is happening to me. And, and then he would say, sounds like you're kind of upset at me. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Right. And, I could see for some clients, for you and I, given what we know about the workings of personality and healing, it wouldn't bother us. It might actually be very welcomed, or like, thank you for not letting me focus on these other things.
Yeah, I've had that. Yep.
But I can imagine other clients feeling really dismissed and unheard and invalidated.
Yeah. Done poorly. Right. And I think it's taken me a while to learn that. And I think I've made that mistake because, I tend to emulate my own experience in therapy as a therapist. And I have missed the boat on that. And for the last 6 years, I've been looking for ways to talk to my clients so that we can look under the ostensible and learn about what's under the blanket between us. Something as simple as you really value a place where you can actually talk about it. Like somebody brings something up about what's going on with their partner or whatever. They want something. They want something now. They might be talking about, their partner, but they want something in this moment, and finding a way. The blanket doesn't want to lift. It doesn't want to lift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons to not. Yeah. At the very least, routine and tradition.
Right.
But also because of shame and worry and terror of not going well.
Yeah.
Also complete lack of awareness. I mean, I would say 99% of people you have this style of therapy with, they'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why is this happening? Why are you asking me these questions? It's so dumb,
It's very here and now kind of comment though. So it's really that kind of comment ought to be welcome.
Yeah.
Like, you want to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's a really important question because it is a really important question.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure he can pull it off in terms of, I get it. and you know, this is my style of therapy,
Right.
and I do think it works. I can explain it to you, but before I get to that, could just tell me like what's going on with you right now. Sounds like you're kind of upset at me. You're frustrated with me.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Right.
And through that, he manages to win them over eventually or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a break, and the rest will be for patrons, because I want to ask you a question, which is, what do you think is going on underneath the blanket between you and I right now?
Okay.
Okay, let's take a break.
All right.
But if you are not a patron, you're not going to hear the rest of this conversation. So become a patron, and otherwise take care of yourself, because
You still deserve it.